everybody, and welcome to another episode of Unsubscribe, the demandDrive podcast. I am your host, AJ Alonso. I've got my co-host with me, Alex Ellison. Alex, how you doing today? Looking a little sleepy, I'm not going to lie.
First of all, rude. Secondly, I did trip over my words a few times before we started recording, so we'll see how it goes, but hopefully I've got a good grasp on the English language today.
I mean, it is like 8:15 in the morning for you, so it's understandable that, just waking up, getting ready to record a podcast, a very important podcast, I might add, with Chelsea Leahy, Director of Training here at demandDrive, where we're going to be talking about the brand new demandDrive Academy. So buckle up, Alex. It's going to be a good one.
Buckled up.
For all of the people just listening to this, audio only, really missed out on a solid pantomime of buckling a seatbelt. Shame. Next time, watch the episode. But Chelsea, we're excited to have you here talking about the brand new DD Academy, self-certification programs, the importance of training, all that good stuff. So if people don't know who you are by now, at some point, if they've never heard of you, give the old rundown of who is Chelsea Leahy, your background here at demandDrive, and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. Good morning, you guys. It's good to be on. Thank you for having me. So as you mentioned, I head up our training department here at demandDrive. Been with the company for about 8.5 years. And I started off, I know it doesn't sound real when I say it out loud, honestly. But pretty much like most people at demandDrive, I started off as an SDR back in 2015. And I did that role for about 3.5 years, and really just learned all the ins and outs of what the job entails, what works, what doesn't work. And interestingly enough, as the organization continued to grow, it just kind of worked out timing wise that I was also interested in growing my career and really was more kind of intrigued by the aspect of like really working with and coaching and training others, based off of like what I had learned in the role and found success with. And so that's kind of how my current job here at DD was born. And that's what I've been doing ever since. So it's been a learning curve, step by step as we go, but it has been tremendously rewarding and really, really eye-opening. You learn a lot when you're the teacher, which is really interesting.
Yeah, it's funny, right? I hear a lot of people who are in like various like online communities or sort of act as pseudo instructors for different SDRs, say that one of the best ways to learn is to teach. Like there's so much that you uncover about your own systems, processes, biases, etc. Like the way that you've always done things, that as soon as it's put in front of someone else who doesn't do it that way, and they're like, well, this is how I do it. You're like, oh, hold on, wait a minute. That's pretty smart. Where did you learn that? And then your teachings start to grow as you're able to connect and collaborate with others. So I think that's spot on the way that you said that. The more you teach, the more you learn.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the most important aspect of a sales role. And one of the reasons why I personally am so intrigued by sales and really love sales, outside of like the human aspect and the psychology behind it, is the fact that it's a really interesting career because it's ever evolving, right? Things, AJ, you and I were an SDR at the same time, right? Yeah. And so things that we did back then or that worked really well back then might not work so well now.
Zero place in today's sales environment. I would be laughed off the phone.
Yeah. And so it's really interesting because it's one of the jobs where you can always continuously learn. And so no matter how long you've been doing this role or how long you've been in a sales career, there's always going to be an opportunity to learn a different tactic or a different idea or a different process or a different way of doing things, which is, I think, like one of the reasons why I love being in like that training and coaching type of role and why it's so important for SDRs to kind of have that foundational understanding of like, you need to be interested in continuously learning new things in this job if you want to find success.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that one of the main tenets of like the reps that we look for when we're recruiting SDRs is curiosity, that growth mindset, right? Like the drive to always learn and grow within the role, but also like not resting on your laurels and figuring out like, oh, like I kind of got this SDR thing down pat. I'm good to go. Let me just coast until it's time for a promotion. Like definitely not the best way to go about things.
Yeah, I would say, one thing that I've learned throughout my time in this role specifically, I work really closely with recruiting, as you mentioned, AJ, and, finding the right people for this job.
Hmm.
And although, we can teach somebody the ins and the outs of being an SDR and how to do proper research and how to navigate a cold call kind of conversation and how to write a sales email, what we can't necessarily teach somebody is the drive to want to do the job. And that is really crucial to find success in the sales role, because at the end of the day, your own success in the job really is in your own hands. You have to have that motivation and that drive to every single day say, okay, I'm going to pick up that phone and I'm going to keep calling, which can be a difficult thing to do. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's one other thing to sort of point to with that motivation is there's different levels to it, right? You can have getting up in the morning every day saying I'm going to do my activities, make my dials, send my emails is one level to it. But then if you'll have a job, you'll be fine, you'll do all right, you'll make decent commission. But if you really want to take that next step, and this is where you sort of see that separation between the good players and the players SDRs and the best SDRs, is having the motivation to go find additional training resources, to reinvent their email strategies or templates, things like that, without needing to be prompt or forced to do it by their manager. So, yeah, I don't know, Chelsea, if you have any interesting insights onto sort of what are those differences you see when people are just starting out in the SDR role? Like, can you tell immediately who's going to be an A player versus a B player, or does it take some time? Do people surprise you ever?
yeah, no, that's a really good question. There have been some surprises for sure, right? I think some of the best SDRs that I've seen have been the worst SDRs at the very beginning. Um, you know, I joke sometimes in training week saying, most people aren't that great at this job when they first start. And I would consider myself one of those individuals.
Same. I
Um,
sucked. I
you
sucked
know,
real hard.
yeah, it's an entire learning curve, this type of a role. And I I think it's important for anybody that is either just starting their SDR career or even thinking about starting in an SDR career to really do a little bit of research and understand that there is a learning curve to this job. And if you're looking for the type of job that, like, oh, I can step in and just immediately do really well and hit the ground running, that's a really rare occurrence in the SDR role, because there's a lot that has to be learned in this job. There's learning the ins and the outs of how to sell something. There's then learning all about what it is you're actually selling. Then there's all the tools that we have to use to help us do our jobs. And there's all the processes and all the messaging and all the language. There's a lot that has to come full circle for somebody to really excel in this job. And so I think, Alex, to your point, those individuals that really seek learning opportunities and are continuously trying to evolve what they are doing, those are the SDRs that are continuously hitting goal month after month, who are being promoted to a senior SDR, a team lead, getting those account executive roles. So I do think that is really crucial and important to, one, like, really understand, what it is that the SDR role entails, and then being willing to continuously work on it, basically. And it's not just going to be the type of job where, oh, I learned how to do it and that's that. You're always going to be kind of relearning how to do it, if you will.
Yeah. I think that's a great segue to talk more about the academy that we've built and
Yeah.
focus on the fact that there are SDRs out there who are looking to continuously improve. They're looking to either hone the skills that they've already developed or pick up new skills, new tactics. Like you said, the role is constantly evolving. So looking at how other people are doing things and emulating that and trying to bring it into your own processes. There's a ton of different academies, courses, instructors, thought leaders out there who are teaching people how to do sales development, prospecting in a specific way. I know that with the way that we've built the academy, it's kind of geared more towards now, and I'm sure you'll touch on it, but getting those foundational skills built, like you said, so that you really understand, like, what am I doing here? Why am I an SDR? And then how can I build on top of that to move my career in the direction that I want it to go? A lot of work went into building the academy. I know you've done a ton of work on the back end in terms of curriculum development and all that stuff. So talk a little bit about that. What's the experience been like building out the academy, and what are the plans that you've got for it moving forward?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. It's a good one. I think that, when I was building our training internally here at demandDrive, we all know demandDrive has kind of a unique business model in terms of how everything kind of works here. And so that was a challenge for me in my role to figure out, okay, if we have a group of 8 SDRs coming to start, but they all go off to sell different technologies into different industries with different messaging, how do we make this initial training relevant for everybody, regardless of how much experience they have, regardless of what they end up selling?
Yeah, that's so tough, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm selling HR technology, and the person to the left of me is selling cybersecurity, and I'm talking to managers, and they're talking to chief information security officers. We are on very different paths.
Exactly. And so what it really kind of came down to is there's really 2 aspects to training an SDR, right? There's, what does it mean to be an SDR? And what foundational skill sets do you need to achieve that? And then there's the product knowledge and the industry knowledge, and really kind of learning what it is you're selling and the value that it provides and all of that fun stuff, right? And then the key to success is taking both of those and blending them together, right? How do I take those fundamentals and apply them to this product that I'm selling, or this technology, or whatever it is? And so that's really kind of the mindset behind the way that we approach training at demandDrive, and kind of the approach of this academy as well, right? So the way that our first module is designed for the academy is very similar, right? Regardless of what you're selling, regardless of what company you're interviewing for to be an SDR, or you just got an accepted offer from, what are some of those foundational skill sets that you need to know and understand to then be able to actually absorb the more technical product knowledge, right? And that's really what was in mind when designing these courses, and making sure that they are relevant to anybody that is interested in learning more about their career.
Yeah, and I really like that. And it points to something that I think I remember learning early on in my SDR role, is that you don't actually need to know that much about the product you're selling, as long as you know how, like, those foundational skills that you're talking about. I know we've had a number of instances here where a manager, maybe not even on that project, will just like jump into a call shadow, or like, not a role play, maybe a role play, and like do the SDR role for a second. And they don't really know what they're selling, but they know that they don't have to know that, because they know how to handle an objection. They know when they're supposed to pass it off to an AE or something like that. They know all those foundational things. So saying that, and then obviously at demandDrive, where you see all the different clients we have and the different products being sold, really sort of shows or shines a light on the foundation in a way that I would assume at a lot of companies the training doesn't do that, and it just kind of mixes it in with product knowledge and all that other stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that the way that we have to train our SDRs to be available and able to sell for any of our clients, essentially, right? It did kind of give us that perspective of, really understanding those foundational skills and being able to train around them. You think about an SDR that maybe gets a job directly at a software company, and you wonder what their onboarding and training, process probably looks like. And it's probably very heavily integrated with, okay, you're going to meet with the engineering team to learn about the tool and how it works. And, this is the messaging that we use. And this is, the objections that you'll hear and how you overcome them. And so because we don't have that rigid structure with the SDRs that we onboard here, it did kind of make us have to look at this through a different lens and approach it differently, which I think has been for the benefit, because now we have a company full of SDRs that really understand, okay, I can sell anything really as long as I'm applying these skill sets that I've learned, which is ultimately what we want, right? We want SDRs that aren't just sitting in front of a screen and saying, here's my list, I'll just call down it. Okay, Bob is next. We want SDRs that are putting a lot of thought and intention behind the work that they're doing. Why am I reaching out to Bob? Why might he have a need for this tool based on the role that he has at his organization? What piece of my tool might really intrigue him and his team. And that's really where we want to get our SDR's mindset to be, out of that kind of robotic, like I'm just going to push a button and make a dial, and more into the real understanding of why are you reaching out to this individual and what value are you actually trying to provide them? Because at the end of the day, those are the types of conversations that we want to have as SDRs versus just, hey, check out this cool new technology. We want to make sure that there's some real meat behind the outreach that we're doing.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of the adage, like if you catch a man a fish and he eats for a day, teach a man to fish and he eats for a lifetime. You know the one. You know exactly what I'm talking about. But,
we all know what you mean.
But I do think a lot of SDR training programs out there are just catching fish for their reps. They're giving them templates. They're giving them call scripts. Their job is just to execute what's been put in front of them and not go beyond that. But when they get put into a situation where they start questioning, like, why am I doing this? Like, the ability to lean back on some of the skills that you talked about and some of the skills that you teach reps internally here about how to be a good SDR and go that next level. They can't do that because it's not in the script or they don't have a template for it. Like everything's just put in front of them.
Right.
And if you teach somebody why these things are important, break it down into sort of individual components and go through the reason that subject lines are only 3 words are X, Y, and Z. And it increases open rates by X%. Go ahead and mock up 15 of these and we can A/B test and see what works. Like that's the kind of stuff that you want your SDRs to be doing, because then you as an organization learn more about your audience, about what you're messaging, how your messaging resonates, being able to kick that back up to marketing to create better content. Like it all feeds into each other versus having just that, like you said, robotic SDR who's like executing on what the company says to do and no more. And then they just kind of do that role for, on average, 14 months and either get promoted to an AE or leave. It's really only 2 paths that you see.
Yeah, that intention is so important to the overall outreach. And, if you also think of it from a management perspective, if I was managing SDRs, I would want to get my team to a place where they're pretty self-sufficient, right? And they have the skill sets to read their data and say, okay, I need to adjust X because my connect rate is low, or I need to revamp my messaging because my response rate is really low on my emails. And so when we can work with SDRs to think independently about the work that they're doing, and not even just their own metrics and like their own scripts and things like that, but really getting curious about the industry that they're calling into and the types of people that they're calling into, that's when you get a really engaged SDR and somebody that wants to learn more and take the next step in their career, whether that becoming an AE or maybe, handling their own qualification calls or their own demos. But, you don't really get there with somebody until they have that really good understanding of how all of this works together. And to your point, AJ, how it all ends up blending together from a sales perspective, a marketing perspective, and so on and so forth. So, I think that's really the key to a lot of, our approach here at demandDrive and ultimately what we're trying to expose people outside of demandDrive to through this academy.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that it might do that you didn't touch on is increase the amount of sort of authenticity that comes from the outreach these SDRs are doing, right? If you're a burnt out SDR, I'll admit at one point I'm just sort of sending the email templates. I know that I've had some success with in the past, but it's pretty automated. And as automation has sort of grown to what it's become in our industry over the last 5-10 years, there's a few ways you can really get in front of someone on their inbox other than being lucky. And it's authenticity, creativity, personalization, and relevance. And I think that authenticity it's hard to define, but really easy to spot. Like when I get an email, I can tell quickly if they tried hard on it or if this is just kind of another automated BS email that I don't need to care about. So I just wanted to point out that I think that's something that as we continue to see more and more automated messages that are going to get closer and closer to looking like real authentic messages, I think being an individual SDR who's able to show that in their outreach is huge. And I think having that understanding and eagerness about the role is super important to making that happen successfully.
I couldn't agree more. And the way that you use the term authenticity, it reminds me of the way that I use the term intention, right? It's really understanding the why behind who you're reaching out to, right? Like, it's not just, oh, I have to call this company and here's somebody that has a somewhat relevant title, so I'll just give them a call. It's, well, why would this organization need this tool or have a need for this tool? And even going a little bit further and saying, okay, if they didn't have a tool like this already, what might their process look like? What might so-and-so's day-to-day look like? And if they did implement this tool, how would that change their day-to-day? How would that, like, what would their experience be? And I think, when you can ingrain that type of thought process in an SDR from day one of them being an SDR, it is, you see them get to that self-sufficient place in the role a lot faster because they were, kind of molded with that understanding versus somebody, honestly, like myself, when I first started in the role and was kind of lost and didn't really fully understand what I was doing or the importance of it. It definitely took me longer to get to the point where I was like, okay, like I get this and I want to make money and I'm going to really go for it. So I think if we can shorten that ramp period and we can start training our SDRs to have this understanding and have this mindset on how to be authentic over the phone and through our emails and how to start our outreach from a place of intention, they're only going to get to that place faster. And we're going to see a lot more success come from our SDRs and them grow in their career as well, which of course is a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. I'm big on authenticity in general. I think I'm similar to you, Chelsea, where when I started, the role was very input heavy, output heavy, not outcome driven. I knew what I had to do on a day-to-day basis, but understanding why I was doing it or what the second or third level impact of that activity was totally lost to me. But as soon as you do start to figure that out and you understand, like you've been talking about, your place within an organization, what you do on a day-to-day basis and how it impacts everything around you, and then how to realistically just be a lot more comfortable doing that and sounding more like yourself rather than a script or an email template or whatever, you start to really grow within the role. And you're right, the faster you can get someone to that spot, the more productive they're going to be. And I think everyone understands this, but SDRs, no matter how much you put into a training program, no matter how many benefits you give them, they have a shelf life. People don't want to be in this role forever. You've realistically got 12 to 14 months of an SDR being productive at an organization until they want to move into an AE role, into management, into a totally different department.
Or get burnt out.
Yeah. Lasting more than 14 months in a role where you're realistically not being supported all that well, unbelievably difficult to do.
Yeah.
And then if you think about training programs today or onboarding programs, that's a month gone already from just getting them up to speed, getting them in your systems, getting them ready to go. You only have 11 to 13 months now. So how do you make the most out of those 11 to 13 months before you churn through that rep, get a new one in, burn more cash on the recruiting and hiring side of things, and then do it all over again and again and again and again?
Yeah, I think like what's really interesting too is for an SDR, I oftentimes think back, and AJ, I feel like you probably do this too, and Alex, you as well. I think back to like when I first started a lot and like what I knew, what I didn't know, what I understood, what I didn't understand, what took me longer to grasp.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think one of the things for a lot of SDRs when they start in this job that can be really difficult to overcome mentally is this is a metrics driven role, right? There's a quota assigned to what you're doing. So there's that kind of looming monthly goal that you have to hit, right? And I remember like that just like seemed like the top of Mount Everest to me when I first started. I'm like, how on earth am I going to hit this goal? Like 3 meetings a month, which for my project that I was on was really difficult. And I think like one thing that really helped me in talking about mindset in the SDR role was learning how to, and AJ, something you had said was what kind of sparked this for me, is learning how to like create smaller goals and focus on the work that you do in the job that gets you to that 3 goal, right? So stop focusing on, I have to get 3 meetings this week, and focus on, I'm going to have 3 solid conversations today, because we don't get meetings without having conversations, and we don't have conversations without doing the outreach that we need to do. So I think, for anybody that is starting off an SDR career or thinking about it, having that understanding of like, really understanding how this all works and how to kind of break things down and not get too over excited and like, oh God, I have to hit this monthly goal. That's a really important piece of all of this too, and kind of ties back to that like self-motivation and everything that we chatted through. It's just really important to be mindful of those things in this job, because it can be really easy to get overwhelmed and like discouraged when you're not seeing a ton of success. But success doesn't always equal a meeting. Success can be those conversations that you're having. Success can be, I blew my daily activities out of the water today. And those are things that can be celebrated as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was having a conversation a few months ago with one of the SDRs and sort of talking about mindset, because they had a low connect rate going on. But the way they phrased it was just like, every time I pick up the phone, it's 1 dial closer to a conversation. And I thought it sounds like a small shift, 1 dial closer to a conversation, 1 dial closer to hitting my daily activities goal. But thinking about it in that lens and having that concept of like, okay, this could be the one, and being able to find a mindset that makes that not like a tedious or arduous task goes a huge way, especially if it's a tough time of the year. If like people aren't picking up the phones, you just are on working for a client that has a low sort of volume of sales. It can make all the difference between like lasting 6 months and quitting and sort of becoming a senior SDR, becoming an AE at that company. And all it really takes is, it's easier said than done, but like shifting that mindset of like, why am I dialing to hit my activities goal? No, I'm dialing because every time I pick up the phone, it's 1 dial closer to having a conversation.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about, demandDrive too, and in our model, and the fact that we have SDRs calling on behalf of all different clients that have different monthly goals, it does teach you kind of how to keep your own success into perspective.
Yeah.
Because, I know something that can be really challenging is when you're on a project that's really hard to get leads for, and maybe you only get a couple a month, and then you see somebody on a different project that's like ringing the bell every day. It can be almost discouraging sometimes, right? And you start to almost compare yourself to what other people are doing. And so it's really important that you kind of really just focus on what is the success for your project or your company or your client, and what does success mean to you and your manager and your team, because at the end of the day, that's what matters. So I think like, it can be easy to get that competitive side. We want a little bit of that in a sales individual, right? Competition is good. But you also have to be mindful of, what does success mean to you versus that individual, and not get too caught up on like the minor details of that.
Yeah. And I mean, at the same time, too, understanding what success means to you, but looking at that person who's ringing the bell every day and going like, well, what are they doing that I'm not? Like, are they looking back at the fundamentals and utilizing them in a way that I haven't considered? Or are they leaning more on a particular tactic that maybe would work in my industry that I haven't tried yet? Like, on top of going through stuff like the DD Academy or leveraging online communities, like if you have the luxury of working with other team members that are seeing success, talk to them and figure out like what they're doing that you aren't and how you can emulate that. Again, the fish metaphor, like don't just have them give you a template or give you a talk track, have them teach you why what they're doing is working, and then break that down into components and then build it back up in a way that makes sense for you. I think that's like, Alex, you talked about it earlier, one of the best ways for a B player to get to an A player, or like what separates the best SDRs from just kind of like the middle of the pack. It's the ability to do that, to like see something, break it down, and then build it up in a way that works for you, test, iterate, and then execute. That is, in my mind, like the number one way that an SDR goes from good to great.
For sure. And that ability, it is not easy, right?
Oh God, no. I was a rep for like 2.5, 3 years. And only in maybe the last like year of me being an SDR full time did I finally figure out like, oh, this is how you do that. Like, this is how I look at something and then build it for me. It takes forever to get there.
It does. It takes a long time. And, that's something that we have really kind of baked into our week 1 training internally at demandDrive, is the understanding of, okay, how do I take we'll just call it a packet of information, right? Whether it be a client website, marketing materials, all messaging, everything that we have access to. How do I take all of that, internalize it, and break it down and regurgitate it in my own words, right? Because that's really the key to being able to do this like time after time again, right? If you see an SDR that's been at demandDrive for a number of years and has worked with multiple different clients throughout that time, that's what they're doing. They've learned how to take that information and say, okay, I know how to talk about this as myself, right? And make it sound conversational. And that's really what we want to be able to teach our SDRs how to do, because at the end of the day, that's where the success is going to come from. If they take an SDR job at another company or become an AE at another company, they're going to have to know how to do that if they want to find success. They're going to have to know how to take all of this technical information that's not that exciting sounding and make it sound like something that everybody wants, right? Those are some of the skill sets that we want our SDRs to really hone in on and know how to do, because that's what's going to make them have, as we've talked about, that kind of full circle understanding of what they're actually doing and why it matters.
Well, let's talk about the latter half of that circle, because I know the Academy as it exists now is very foundational focused, giving you the understanding of why you're in the role, how to start being an SDR, and how to kind of hit the ground running maybe a little bit faster than if you didn't have access to training materials or whatever it might be. But that's where we're at now. What does the future look like? What other modules are you planning to add? What other courses do you want to focus on? Very briefly kind of talk us through like V2 and then beyond for the Academy.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you asked, because exactly like you said, right now we have our first module, which is Build a Foundation, which is, really just what we've been talking about. Outside of the technical aspects, outside of the product knowledge, how do you find success in an SDR role? And then, so that's really, it's for anybody really, but more geared towards somebody that's kickstarting their career as an SDR. Next, we will have our second module, which will be more for the kind of like senior SDR, right? So somebody that's been in the role for a little while, but really wants to learn how to master the job, right? okay, I know how to go through the day-to-day workflow of my job. I kind of have my messaging down, but how do I take things to that next level, right? So that's going to be more geared towards like what Alex and I were talking about, that authenticity, that intention behind the work that we're doing, and learning how to kind of take some of your own data and metrics and things like that, and use it to create changes to what you're doing. And then lastly, our third module that will be released will be geared towards individuals that are looking to maybe take a step outside of that SDR career and grow. Whether it be, they want to become an AE or they want to manage SDRs. We're going to talk a little bit about, how to kind of leverage some of those skill sets, and how you can take everything that you've learned in the SDR role to elevate your career, whether, like I said, whichever path that may be.
Awesome. That's exciting stuff. And I know we're going to pepper in some additional resources like webinars that we do internally here, our symposiums. I know we're going to try and repurpose those in some capacity. Those are great opportunities for you to learn from other SDRs about things that they're doing on a day-to-day basis when they're combating stuff like time management or objection handling or pipeline development. Like all of these things like you've been talking about that you foundationally need to know as an SDR, hearing from people who do it really well and learning how to take what they do, break it down, and make it your own. That is facilitated on a month or a quarterly basis at this point here at demandDrive, that we want to try and give access to people in the academy for as well. So lots to come, very exciting stuff. Really looking forward to seeing what V2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. look like.
Yeah, no, this is super exciting. It's something that, we've really kind of, I feel like, mastered some of the art of training our internal SDRs. And so we wanted to be able to provide that same level of knowledge and understanding to individuals, like you were saying, AJ, that might not have access to it in their current role, or are maybe still in school, and kind of thinking about what type of career they want to choose when they graduate, and are maybe just curious about what an SDR role really means. It's a great resource for anybody that's, either already in it and looking to learn a few new things, or somebody that's maybe just looking to learn a little bit more about what the job entails and if it would be a good fit for them in the long run.
Yeah. People from other industries as well. I know a lot of people in like the service or hospitality industry, they look at tech sales being an SDR as like an opportunity to get out of there and try a different career path that has, in a lot of cases, fairly unlimited earning potential if you're really good at it. And so looking at it as more of just like all right, if I'm trying to move industries and I have an academy set up somewhere where I can learn the ins and outs of what it's like to be an SDR before I even start applying, huge leg up in any interview process that you have. So
absolutely.
A lot of people like that.
For sure. Guaranteed you'll come away with some really good nuggets of information there. And frankly, I mean, it would have been a great resource for me when I interviewed back in the day. I wish I had it.
I came into this role not knowing the difference between inbound and outbound sales development. So
same.
I don't think I knew
now.
I don't think I knew what sales development was. I just needed a job.
Yeah, and look at all three of us now. We're thriving. So no, I'm really excited. It's been it's been in the works for quite some time, and it's something that I'm really proud of, and I think that again it's really for anybody. It can be for somebody that's starting their job as an SDR, somebody that's maybe just curious and learning more about what it's all about. Check it out. It's going to be there, and we're going to have more content soon, as you mentioned, AJ, which is really exciting. So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. I'll make sure to link everything on the landing page for this podcast so people can get a look at what the Academy's all about, sign up, all that good stuff. Chelsea, thank you for hopping on the show and talking us through not just the Academy, but general philosophy behind training and what you should really look at when you're either an SDR looking to grow within the role or jumping into the role, the mindset that you need to have, the foundational skills that you have to build, all that good stuff. If there was one summarizing point that you could make to cap this episode and leave our audience with, what would that be?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess it would just be kind of like what we started the episode talking about, which is there's always something new to learn in this job. I'm the perfect example of that. I've, been teaching for a while now, but I've been in this at this company and in this world for 8.5 years, and I still learn something new all the time, new tactics, new ideas. So that would be like my one thing. Seek out opportunities to learn from your peers or people outside of your organization, and don't be afraid to implement some of those things that you learn, because it's never a one size fits all, and it's an ever evolving job. So the more that you can, test different things out and try things out, the better off you'll be.
Love it. Wise words to end with. So Chelsea, thank you again for being here. If people want to get in touch with you, learn more about you, the Academy, etc., how can they do that?
Yeah, definitely through LinkedIn. You guys can feel free to shoot me a connect there or send me a message. And really excited for you guys to all see it and have access to, a lot of the similar trainings that our internal SDRs do.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here, Chelsea. Thank you, listener, for listening to this episode. Make sure to like and subscribe to unsubscribe. Get more insights like this in your inbox. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks again, Chelsea.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching this episode of Unsubscribe, the Demand Drive podcast. If you want less of those nasty unsubscribe emails in your inbox, go ahead and check out some of the content we have to the left. And make sure that you subscribe to Unsubscribe to keep your SDR team in tip-top shape.